Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today I am doing my November wrap-up, and November was kind of a weird reading month. I read 8 books, which is great, but it had, like, at the beginning of the month I read a bunch of contemporary romance back to back, then I had kind of like a lull, and then I had 3 DNFs in a row, and then I ended the month on kind of like a disappointing note. So it's been a weird month, but let's just get started. So at the beginning of the month, as I said, I read a couple of contemporary romances back to back, and that was because at the beginning of November was the presidential election in the United States, and it was a very stressful time. And so in those days that were just kind of like a waiting limbo period while the votes were being counted, I just binge read a bunch of contemporary romances. The first one that I read was You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This is a YA contemporary high school romance with a female-female romance. And at the beginning of the story, our main character Liz is trying to get a music scholarship to college, and she then finds out that she isn't going to get this scholarship that she has been depending on and that she really needs in order to go to college. So she's trying to figure out what she's going to do now. So she decides to run for prom queen in her school because her school takes prom king and prom queen very seriously, or their whole town does, and whoever wins prom king and prom queen gets scholarships. The only problem is that Liz has spent pretty much her entire time at high school trying to avoid attention, so this is going to be very difficult for her. But then while she is in the running for prom queen, she meets another girl who's also running for prom queen, and the two of them fall for each other. And this book was so cute. Like, I really enjoyed this. It was the perfect thing to read when I just needed a distraction. It pulled me in right away. I really loved the characters. I really liked the main romance in it. I liked the kind of growth that the main character Liz goes through. She learns about herself, and she learns that she doesn't have to hide who she is or make herself smaller. She doesn't have to avoid attention. She can, like, be her full self, and the arc that she goes through in that way I really loved. It also had some very touching moments, especially with Liz and her family. There was one scene between Liz and her grandmother that, like, had me tearing up, which, like, I don't cry at books very easily, so that one was just, like, very sweet and touching, and I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4.5 stars. Next, I read the first 2 books in the Well Met trilogy, which the first book is Well Met and the second book is Well Played. These are both by Jen DeLuca, and they are adult contemporary romances that are set at a Renaissance festival, which was a really fun setting. Going into these, I was a little bit worried that the setting was going to be, like, too cheesy, and, like, it didn't end up being too cheesy, and it just ended up being a really fun element to the story. Also, I just really enjoy Renaissance festivals, and I wanted to read these because I didn't get to go to the Renaissance Festival this year, and I miss it very much, so I got a little bit of the Renaissance Festival vibes from reading these books. But yeah, so in the first book, Well Met, we are following Emily, and at the beginning of the story, her life has kind of been upended because she had been in a long-term serious relationship, and a lot of elements of her life had been connected to that relationship, but her boyfriend broke up with her, and so she feels very adrift. Around the same time, her sister, that she's not particularly close with, but her sister got into a serious car accident and is recovering, and so Emily goes to live with her sister to help her while she is recovering, and also to help take care of her, I think, 13-year-old niece. And her niece wants to be a part of the local Renaissance festival that their high school puts on every year, and so Emily ends up being roped into helping out with the Renaissance festival as well. And while she's there, she butts heads with one of the main organizers for the Renaissance festival, Simon, I think is his name. And then, of course, the two of them end up following to each other, so it's kind of a, like, antagonist to lovers story, and I really enjoyed this. As I said, I really liked the Renaissance Festival setting. It just like made me very happy since I didn't get to go to the Ren Fest this year. I really liked the main romance and the two main characters. I felt like I knew them pretty well for such a short book. I really liked that they both had their own like anxieties and fears that made them feel more real. I really liked the way that their personalities fit together and that they ended up like supporting each other, and I just thought that they were very sweet. So I had a really fun time with this one. I think this is one of those books that the only thing that could have made it better was if we'd gotten Simon's perspective. This is a thing that I am like harping on this year in the romances that I read, is that I really want to see the romance from both characters' perspectives, and in this we're only seeing it from Emily's perspective, which like I still loved the romance, but I just wish that I had gotten to see even like a glimpse of Simon's perspective and how he was feeling and how he was viewing her and all of that. But I absolutely loved it. I thought this was just so much fun. I gave it 5 stars. And then immediately after that, I read Well Played, which is the second book. And in this one, we are following a different character who was a side character in the first book. She was one of Emily's friends at the Renaissance Festival. So in this, we're following Stacy, who has worked at this Renaissance Festival every year, pretty much since its inception. And so she knows all of the regulars, all of the acts that come back every year. And last year, she hooked up with one of the guys from one of the musical acts that comes back every year. And at the beginning of this book, it is during the off season, and so he's like left now and going to other Renaissance festivals, and she decides to try and contact him and see if they have any kind of relationship outside of just like a hookup. And so they start talking through text and email, but she doesn't realize that the person that she's talking to isn't actually the person she thinks he is, and so there's a little bit of mistaken identity in this. And then when the next year rolls around and that musical act comes back into town, she finds out that she's actually been talking to somebody different. And then we kind of see how that plays out. And this one I had fun with. I didn't like it as much as the first book, but I still thought it was fun. I was surprised that I really actually enjoyed their relationship being built through text and email. Usually that's a thing that I don't like, but I think that this worked because it wasn't purely told through the texts and emails. We were with Stacy as she was thinking about their relationship and like having her emotional reactions, so we had her perspective as well as the messages. So I think that's why it like worked for me. I did enjoy the main characters and the romance that they had. I think what didn't work as well for me in this was that there was more miscommunication, and there was like the mistaken identity. I felt like there were kind of 2 climaxes to the story. I'm not a big fan of the conflicts that happen in romances. Like, I don't need there to be conflict in it. I'm like, I just want like the cuteness of them like getting together. That's all I'm here for. So it was like more conflict than I wanted. It was too much like miscommunication and mistaken identities. I also felt like the two of them like didn't really understand each other, but I still like really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars because it was still a lot of fun. I just didn't like it as much as the first one. And the last contemporary romance that I read this month was The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang. In this one, we're following our main character Stella, who has autism, and at the beginning of the story, her mother is pressuring her to get a boyfriend, get married, have kids, but Stella has had some bad experiences with relationships and dating, and she worries that she is bad at sex, and so she wants to get better at it. So the way that she decides to do this is by hiring a male escort to help her, to teach her and to help her get better at sex. And then the two of them end up falling for each other. And this one, there were some things that I really liked about this one and some things that like didn't work as well for me. One of the things that I really liked about this was that we get both characters' perspectives. We get Stella's perspective and I think Michael is his name. So we get to see it from both sides, and I just really enjoy that. I like seeing the relationship from both sides. I I liked both of the main characters. I did really enjoy like their romance and their dynamic. I like that Stella is really passionate about her work as an economist and that she like talks about it in the book. And I liked that Michael likes that she's so passionate about her work, so I liked that dynamic a lot. But there were a few things in this that didn't really work for me. One of them is kind of the pacing of it, and I think a lot of that is because I felt like there were too many sex scenes in this. And I know that that's kind of like the premise of this, I guess, is that she's trying to learn how to be better at sex. But it ended up becoming kind of repetitive. Like, I don't have a problem with sex scenes in books. They don't make me uncomfortable. I don't generally have super strong feelings or opinions about them. But it just became too much and became like kind of repetitive, and it made the story feel like it was going in circles, and I wanted to see more of the characters doing other things and, you know, getting to know each other in other ways, and we get some of that, and I really liked the parts where we got to see them like hanging out and doing things like outside of that. And there were times where we got to even see Michael's family and spend time with his family, and I really liked those elements of it. But there were still just like so many sex scenes that it just made it feel really repetitive, and I just started getting really bored and kind of like feeling disconnected from the momentum of the story and the relationship. There were also two things right at the end that kind of bothered me. One of them was that I felt like Michael's character was pretty like even keeled throughout most of the story, and then like suddenly gets like very aggressive right at the end, which felt like it came out of nowhere. And then there's this other thing at the end when there's kind of like the main conflict. They've had their like falling out or whatever that happens in pretty much every romance, and it's because of a miscommunication, because they both are in love with each other but they won't like admit it to the other because of reasons. And there's a moment where they're talking to each other and Michael realizes that it's been a miscommunication, and he realizes how she feels and that she's made assumptions about how he feels that are not correct. And in that moment, he could have so easily just gone like, oh no, that's not how I feel. I actually really like you, or I love you. We should be together. Like, you know, he would say it better. But instead of doing that, which seemed like the logical thing to do in that moment, was he was like, okay, so now I'm gonna let her leave, and now I have to go plan like some big grand romantic gesture to show her how I feel. I was just like, why can't you just communicate in real time and just be like, no, I just realized that we've miscommunicated, let's not do that. Anyways, I didn't really like how it ended in that way, but I did really like a lot of elements of like the characters and their dynamic. So I gave this one 3.5 stars. Then I read Green Rider by Kristen Britton, and this one I started as a physical read and then I ended up switching to the audiobook for it. This is an adult fantasy that is the beginning of a series, and in this, at the beginning of the story, our main character, Kerrigan, yes, is traveling home from school. She has been I don't remember if she's been expelled or suspended, but she is leaving school, traveling home. She encounters a messenger who is one of the Green Riders, which are messengers for the king, but he is dying. And so he gives her the message that needs to be delivered to the king and some kind of vague warnings, and then dies. And so she takes his horse and this message and kind of sets off on this adventure, kind of avoiding some people that she doesn't fully understand why they're chasing her, as she's trying to get this message to the king. So overall, I did like this book. I think that it wasn't one that like really drew me in and made me feel like I had to know what happened next. It didn't have a lot of like tension to it. There were stakes, but they didn't feel overly urgent to me. I enjoyed the characters, but they weren't necessarily ones that I was like dying to spend time with, or like I needed to know what happened to them. There were a couple of things about it that I felt like sometimes things came too easily, or they weren't explained enough, and it just kind of went like, because magic, and I'm like, okay, I would like a little more explanation than that. There were times where the main character would like trust people or just like know that she could trust them, and I'm like, why would you trust this person? And like usually it turned out fine and she was correct, but also I was like, you had no way of knowing that they were trustworthy. This is just like a random person that you met in the woods. So like that bothered me a little bit, but I did like that she has a horse companion in this. Love a good animal companion. I also liked that a lot of this takes place like in the forest. I don't think that it's particularly like atmospheric in its depiction of the forestiness, but it's still like a setting that I generally enjoy. So I had a good time with this. I think that I would probably continue this series. It may not be top of my list, but I do want to kind of see where this goes and how the story progresses. So I gave this one 3.5 stars. Then I read a book of poetry, which was What the Chickadee Knows by Margaret Newton. I've been trying to get back into reading poetry again because I used to read more poetry in previous years, and this year this is the first book of poetry I've completed. So I generally don't like review or rate the poetry that I read, but I completed this in November. It's not my favorite collection of poetry that I have read, but I'm glad to kind of be getting back into the swing of reading poetry. Then I listened to a nonfiction memoir, which was I'm Still Here, Black Dignity in a World Made for Whiteness by Austin Channing Brown. And in this memoir, she is talking about what it has been like for her growing up as a Black woman in the United States. It takes us through her life from early childhood through going to school, college, going to work. It's also very informed by her experience with religion and how that has impacted her life, and talking about her experience with racism, microaggressions, and how she's become more involved in racial justice. And I thought this book was really good. It's very short, but I think very impactful. So I thought this one was really great. And then the last book that I read in November ended up being a disappointing way to end the month, which was The Betrayals by Bridget Collins. This was one of my most anticipated releases of the year. I was so excited about it because I loved her other book, The Binding, so much. But this one just really ended up not working for me. There were a lot of things about this that I just was like, why do you do this? First, I'll just explain what this book is about, which I feel like it's kind of hard to explain what it's about just because it's sort of amorphous. Like, it doesn't have a really clear, like, straightforward plot. It's mostly just about these two characters and their relationship, and then there's like a bunch of excess information around them that doesn't matter. But this is a vaguely historical fiction story that has like dark academia vibes in it, and it is set at this elite academy that is kind of secluded up in the mountains. And at this academy they teach people how to play this game that is never explained. It's just this like mysterious game that is supposed to be kind of a synthesis of everything. So it's like art, music, science, math, philosophy, just like everything kind of is synthesized into this game, but we never really learn how it works. But we were following three main perspectives, and the first one is Leo, who had a political career, but then was kind of disgraced in his political career and sent back to this academy. He had been a student at the academy a long time ago, and so he's kind of being sent back there. We also have some journal entries from the time when he was a student at the academy, when he was a teenager, so we sort of have two timelines of his perspective. Then we also have Claire, who is a magister at the academy, and she's the first female magister that has ever worked at this academy. And she kind of has some like secrets and some kind of mysterious connection to Leo that we're trying to figure out, like what her connection or history with him is. And then there's a character that is called the Rat, who is this young girl that like secretly lives in the walls of the academy and hides there and thinks of herself as a rat. So this book ended up really not working for me, but there were some things that I liked about it. The first like 100 to 150 pages I really enjoyed. I even like posted about it on my Instagram. Like I was really liking the first 100 to 150 pages. And I think part of that is that I really like Bridget Collins' writing. I really enjoy her style of writing. I think that she built atmosphere really well, especially at the beginning of the book. She did a really good job of kind of drawing me in right away and creating tension that I really wanted to know more and wanted to know what was going to happen. It just was very intriguing. But then after that, it kind of went downhill, and there are just a lot of reasons for that. So one of the main reasons I think was the world building or lack of world building. So I said this is vaguely historical fiction. And it's like super vague. It's not very clear what time period this is set in. Based on some like technology that they have, I would think maybe it's set in like the 30s or 40s. But it's really not explained. We have no idea what country this is set in. And I think that this is part of how Bridget Collins does her like adult historical fiction books. Because the binding was also like that. It was also very vaguely historical fiction. We didn't really know the time period or the country or anything like that. But for some reason in that one it worked, and in this one it doesn't. And I think that part of that is because she introduces a lot of elements to the world building without developing them. She just sort of like is like, and this is a thing, but then like doesn't tell you more about it. So one of those things is the game. It's never explained, and I think that I could give a pass to the fact that the game is never explained, what it is, how it works, all of that. I could forgive that. But then so in this country, there is this political party that is just referred to as the party, that I guess is like a fascist party that's kind of taking over the country. And that's the party that Leo worked for, and then he was like disgraced and sent away. But we really don't know that much about the party. We don't really know that much about its goals, or like it doesn't really impact much about the story, other than the fact that that was Leo's career and that's kind of how he ended up back at the academy. But it just felt like something that needed to be explained more. Another element of this fascist party is that they persecute Christians in this country. And I was kind of confused why it was included. Like I didn't really get what the point was, or if there was some kind of purpose or statement that she was trying to make with that information. But also, since it was never really expanded upon or explained, and it wasn't really relevant or impactful to any of these characters, it was just kind of weird. And it was one of those things where I'm like, this is not an element of world building that you can just kind of sprinkle in and not explain. You need to explain things like that a little bit more. I think there are some elements of world building that can just kind of be like sprinkled in without explanation, but I felt like that was not one of them. I also think that the characters were really hard to care about or feel connected to. Claire, I think, was very much held at a distance from the reader, and that one I think was intentional because her character has a lot of secrets and has kind of an element of mystery around her, and that's part of the main like storyline of this, is figuring out who is Claire, like what is her past, what are her secrets, what is her like mysterious connection to Leo, and why is she so angry at him. So like that was intentional, but it did make it hard to really feel connected to her because she was kind of held at a distance. Leo's character was very hard to care about because I just felt like he was like both unlikable and boring. Like I don't have to like characters to be interested in them, but he was unlikable and boring. And part of his character was that he's very like misogynist, and the way that his like misogyny is written is just very blatant in a way that's like almost makes it silly. I don't know, because when we're in his mind, and he's like talking, usually it's when he's talking to Claire because she's like the only woman at this school, and so much of his internal monologue is just going like, oh, but she's just a woman. And it's like, okay, like, I don't, like, if you're gonna have that be a part of his character, I think it needs to be more integrated into him and not just be like this weird internal monologue. He kind of develops this romance with Claire, and like, I could not bring myself to care about their romance, partially because I don't care about either of them. I don't feel like they particularly had a lot of chemistry, but also because like, I would not wish him on anybody. He's very misogynist, even if it is like written poorly, and he doesn't grow out of it or really learn anything. The only thing that he only starts to like care about her and like respect her, I guess, because she like proves herself to him, that she proves that she is just as smart and just as good as a man at the game. And then the character of the rat, just also not interesting, because it got so boring and repetitive because her character's entire like internal monologue is pretty much just being like, what would a rat do? I'll do that. Or she does something and she goes like, a rat wouldn't do this. Oh my gosh, I'm not acting like a rat. Like, that's her whole thought process. The only perspective that I ended up really caring about in this were the journal entries that gave backstory to Leo from when he was a teenager and a student at the school. That was pretty much the only part, like the only character perspective that I really cared about. But back to talking about the rat. Her whole character was another one of the things that I was like, why is this even here? I don't understand. Because her character was pointless. There was no reason for her to be there. Her character didn't affect anything. There was one small moment in the story where her character did anything that impacted the story or the other characters at all, and it was a thing that I think could have easily been accomplished some other way without having to have created an entire other character and perspective. Like, I don't know, her whole character, I just was like, why? I didn't understand why she was even there. It was so weird. And then yeah, I didn't really like the way that it ended. There was like a twist at the end, but like, I guessed the twist pretty much at the beginning of the book. It was not an especially good twist. And then I was just kind of waiting for the characters to catch up and prove me right, and then they did, and the way that it happened wasn't very interesting. And I also just like, I just didn't like the way that it was done for a lot of reasons that I feel like I can't really explain what I didn't like about it without spoiling it. I don't know. There were so many elements of this that I felt like it gave me so much superfluous information, so much that just was unnecessary. And then there were so many parts that needed so much more information, and it was very strange, and I ended up really not enjoying it and had to kind of like drag myself through the second half of the book. Yeah, so I think I ended up giving this 3 stars on Goodreads. Maybe I should lower that rating. I don't know. It ended up being very disappointing. You know, if Bridget Collins comes out with another adult book that is kind of similar in this like weird, vague historical fiction kind of thing, I would still read it. I would give her another chance because I loved one of her books so much and I was so disappointed by this one, like I'll give her a third try and see how it goes. But yeah, this one was a big disappointment. Then I had 3 DNFs this month, which were Silent Hall by N.S. Dulcart, A Conspiracy of Truths by Alexandra Rowland, and Daughter of Ireland by Julian Osborne McKnight. And all of these are in my fall DNFs video, which I'll link below if you want to hear about the books that I DNF'd during the fall. And then what I am currently reading right now, I am listening to the audiobook for A Reaper at the Gates by Saba Tahir, and I also am physically reading The Half-Drowned King by Linnea Hartzliker. So that is all for my November wrap-up. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!